Let's talk about something nobody wants to admit, but everyone feels. That avoidant ex-gang. Yeah, the one who pushed you away, ghosted, pulled back every time things got too close. They miss you. And not just in some casual passing thought kind of way. They miss the way you loved them. They miss the way you showed up. They miss the safety, the warmth, the emotional intensity they swore they didn't need. See, here's the truth. Avoidants reject the very thing they crave the most, emotional connection. And when someone with an anxious attachment style gives them that connection in full force, it's overwhelming in the moment. But once it's gone, the silence hits, the void sets in, and suddenly they're haunted by the memory of the very love they told themselves they didn't want. Today, we're going to break down the psychology behind that shift, why the avoidant starts to spiral after you walk away, why your absence becomes more powerful than your presence ever was, and how, without even trying, you become unforgettable. Avoidants are masters at convincing themselves they don't need anyone, that they're fine alone, that intimacy is suffocating, and relationships are more trouble than they're worth. And in the beginning, they really believe that story. It's not an act, it's a coping mechanism. They've built a narrative around independence, not because they're naturally cold or emotionless, but because closeness once felt unsafe. Somewhere along the way, connection got paired with pain, and now distance feels like control. Distance feels like freedom. So when someone with an anxious attachment style shows up offering affection, consistency, and a kind of emotional devotion most people don't even know how to give, it clashes hard with the avoidant's inner world. At first, they might even be attracted to it. It feels good to be adored. It's validating. It feels like being chosen in a way they didn't think they needed, but low-key always wanted. But the moment that connection deepens, the avoidant starts to feel pressure. Pressure to reciprocate, pressure to commit, pressure to be emotionally present in a way they were never taught to be. So what do? They pull back. They create distance. They reject. And here's the kicker. When they walk away, they feel relief. Not because they didn't care, but because the intensity of closeness triggered their core wound, that fear of being engulfed, of losing themselves, of disappointing someone. So they cut ties or sabotage things and walk away, convinced that they're doing the right thing for themselves, that being alone is safer, that they're better off without the emotional mess of a relationship. They don't miss you right away. In fact, they might feel lighter, freer, like they finally escaped the drama they kept blaming on the connection. But it's a false high, a temporary escape, because what they're calling independence is really just emotional avoidance. They're not at peace, they're numb. And there's a difference. See, real independence is rooted in self-awareness. It's knowing you can meet your own needs without shutting others out. But avoidant independence, it's a fortress, a place to hide. And when the dust settles and the noise fades and they're sitting alone with the silence they thought they wanted, something unexpected creeps in. They start to think about you not just as the ex they pushed away, but as the person who saw them, the one who showed up even when they shut down, the one who gave love without demanding perfection, the one who accepted their emotional inconsistency and still offered warmth. That kind of love doesn't vanish. It lingers. And now that it's gone, now that there are no more texts, no more calls, no more reminders of your care, the avoidant begins to feel the absence. And this is the moment when the illusion cracks because all that independence they swore was so fulfilling starts to feel hollow. Because it's not that they never needed anyone, it's that they never knew how to need someone safely. And your love made them confront that. Your presence forced them to feel things they buried for years. And while they pushed it away in the moment, it planted a seed that grows in the quiet after you're gone. That's when they start scrolling through old messages, revisiting moments, feeling that ache in their chest they don't know how to name. It's not just about missing you. It's about facing the part of themselves they tried to run from because you held up a mirror. And even if they shattered it, the reflection lingers. That's why avoidants miss the anxious ex they once rejected. Because what they once saw as too much was actually a reflection of what they were too afraid to give. And when you're finally gone, when your love is no longer there to soften the edges of their fear, they're left alone with the very thing they were trying to escape themselves. When an avoidant gets involved with someone who has an anxious attachment style, it might feel like emotional opposites colliding. But underneath the surface, something powerful is happening. Because while avoidants fear closeness, They are also deeply drawn to the safety and consistency anxious partners bring. And they don't even realize it until it's gone. Anxious partners love hard. They give everything. They notice the small details. They text good morning and good night. They check in. They ask how you're feeling, not just what you're doing. They care about connection on a soul level. And even if it sometimes comes off as too much, it's real. It's present. It's available. And for the avoidant, that presence feels like home, even if they don't know how to live in it. At first, the avoidant may not register this emotional safety as something special. In fact, they might take it for granted. To them, the anxious partner's love feels reliable, predictable, always there. And because it's always there, they stop seeing it as valuable. But what's actually happening is this. They're experiencing a level of emotional availability they've never had before. They just don't have the language or the emotional maturity to appreciate it in the moment. You, the anxious partner, offer reassurance when they pull away. You stay steady when they get distant. You reach out after silence. You ask questions when they shut down. You make space for their complicated emotions, even when yours are screaming for attention. That's not neediness. That's emotional generosity. That's love with backbone. That's you trying to build a bridge between two people with different fears. Yours about abandonment and theirs about engulfment. And that effort, that consistency, that's what creates emotional safety. But here's the tragedy. Avoidants don't recognize the safety of that love until it's no longer available. Because to them, love has always come with a catch, with pressure, with pain. So when they find someone who offers it freely without manipulation or control, they assume it's too good to be true, or worse, that it's boring. They confuse calm with lack of chemistry. They interpret emotional presence as clinginess, and they push it away. But time changes perception. Once you're gone, once you stop reaching out, stop checking in, stop trying to fix what they broke, they start to feel the difference. Suddenly, all the people they meet feel emotionally unavailable in the opposite way. They don't check in. They don't care how their day was. They don't remember their coffee order or pick up on their moods. The avoidant starts to realize just how rare it was to feel truly known, not just desired, not just chased, but seen. And in a world where everyone is performing or protecting themselves, that kind of emotional intimacy becomes unforgettable. Because emotional safety isn't loud. It's quiet. It's in the way you listened, in the way you stayed when they pushed, in the way you forgave things that made you cry at night, in the way you still tried to understand their fear, even when it hurt you. You became a soft place for them to land, even as they kept trying to fly away. And now that you're gone, they feel the crash. They feel the absence of your calm, your reassurance, your energy. Avoidants miss the anxious ex, not because of the chase, but because of the emotional shelter that love provided. Because deep down, no matter how much they push others away, no matter how fiercely they defend their independence, there is still a part of them that craves to be held emotionally. And you did that. You held them, not just physically, but emotionally, when they didn't even know how to ask for it. So when their world quiets down, when they lie awake and replay old moments in their head, they're not missing the drama. They're not missing the attention. They're missing the safety, the emotional sanctuary they once had but didn't know how to value. And that realization, it doesn't just sting, it haunts. At first, the silence feels like relief to the avoidant. The anxious ex has finally stopped texting, stopped calling, stopped trying to fix the relationship or decode the distance. For the avoidant, who often feels overwhelmed by emotional closeness, this silence feels like space, like peace, like they finally escaped the pressure of being emotionally accountable to someone else. They tell themselves it's better this way, that they're free, that they're fine. But silence is deceptive. Because while it starts off soothing, what it actually does is remove the distraction of noise. And when the noise is gone, when your voice, your concern, your presence disappears, that's when the thoughts creep in. The thoughts they were too proud to acknowledge. The feelings they were too disconnected to admit. The silence doesn't stay quiet for long. It starts talking loudly. And this is where the regret begins to bloom. They start to remember the little things. The way you always made sure they ate when they were stressed. The way you sensed their moods before they even spoke. the way your texts had a rhythm, a warmth, a pulse, and how cold the world feels without them. They start replaying conversations they didn't listen to the first time. They hear your voice in their head, reminding them that you just wanted connection, that you just wanted to be let in. But instead of letting you in, they pushed you out. And now, in the emptiness they created, they sit with the one thing they can't escape, their own emotional void. Avoidants don't process regret like everyone else. They don't have a big emotional breakdown on day one. Their regret is slow, creeping. It doesn't hit in the moment. It unravels over time. First is confusion, then frustration, then a quiet ache that won't go away because they didn't think they'd miss you. They didn't think someone who gave away too much love would ever be someone they'd crave again. But they were wrong. See, when the anxious ex finally goes quiet, something powerful shifts. The avoidant no longer feels chased. They no longer feel pressured. Instead, they're left with the realization that they were never being controlled. They were being loved, deeply, consistently, fearlessly. And it wasn't the anxious partner's love that was too much. It was the avoidant's capacity to receive it that was too limited. And that's when the echo begins. It's not just silence. It's your absence echoing through every part of their life. Every moment they go to share something and realize you're not there. Every morning they wake up and don't see your name on their phone. Every time they open social media and wonder if you've moved on. The silence becomes a mirror, reflecting everything they ran from, not just you, but the emotional work they refused to do, the conversations they avoided, the vulnerability they resisted. They start to question their decisions. Did they really need space, or were they just afraid? Did they truly feel incompatible, or were they just scared of being seen? The walls they put up to protect themselves start to feel like a prison, because now that you're gone, there's nothing left to defend against. But they're still alone, and this time, the solitude doesn't feel like freedom, it feels like loss. That's the irony. The avoidant builds their life around self-protection. But what they end up protecting themselves from is real intimacy, real love, real connection. And once that connection is gone, regret sets in. Not always with grand gestures or dramatic realizations, but in the slow, painful awareness that they let something rare slip through their fingers, something they didn't understand until it was no longer available. This is when they start to spiral. Not outwardly, but inwardly, quietly. They won't always reach out. Sometimes their pride holds them back. Sometimes their fear still whispers, "Don't go there. It's too vulnerable." But inside they feel it deeply, that ache, that loss, that echo of the love they once had but couldn't hold. Because when the silence echoes, it doesn't just remind them that you're gone, it reminds them of the love they couldn't receive and the regret they now live with. Everything changes the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop explaining your worth, stop defending your love, stop trying to decode mixed signals and navigate emotional walls. For so long, the anxious partner has carried the weight of the relationship, holding on, reaching out, apologizing even when they weren't wrong, doing whatever it takes to keep the connection alive. That dynamic, that emotional imbalance is what the avoidant has grown used to. They've been in control. They've been the one with the emotional upper hand, able to give and withdraw love on their terms, knowing that you'd stay, knowing that you'd come back, knowing that no matter how far they pulled away, you'd still be there waiting with an open heart. But what avoidants don't realize is that love has a breaking point. Even the most loyal heart has a threshold. And when the anxious partner finally reaches it, when they get tired of being the only one trying, they don't leave with anger. They leave with clarity. They walk away, not because they stopped caring, but because they finally started caring about themselves more. And that moment, that quiet, steady decision to stop showing up where they're not met, creates a massive shift in power. Now, the avoidant is no longer in control of the emotional dynamic. The one who used to stay has gone silent. The one who used to beg for closeness now has boundaries. And that shift, it destabilizes the avoidant in a way they never expected. They thought you'd always be there. They thought you'd never have the strength to walk, but you did. And that forces them to confront something they've been avoiding all along, the consequences of their own emotional unavailability. At first, they don't know what to do with a power shift. They're disoriented. Where's the person who used to flood their inbox with long messages trying to fix things? Where's the one who used to over-explain, over-apologize, over-love? That absence isn't just felt. It's jarring. Because it was never just about your presence. It was about the emotional safety they felt, knowing you'd never leave. That reassurance allowed them to be distant. But now, with that reassurance gone, they feel the anxiety they once projected onto you. They begin to question everything. Have you moved on? Are you talking to someone else? Do you still care? Are you happier without them? Suddenly, all the thoughts that once consumed you now consume them. The emotional roles flip. And this reversal is where real regret begins to take root. Because they realize they've lost more than your attention. They've lost your trust, your softness, your willingness to try again. And it stings. The shift in power isn't about ego. It's not about winning. It's about reclaiming your self-respect. And that reclamation speaks louder than any words you could have said. When the anxious partner walks away and doesn't look back, it sends a clear message. I finally see my own worth, and I'm no longer willing to beg you to see it too. That message hits harder than any emotional plea because it shows growth. It shows healing. It shows that you've stopped playing the emotional tug of war and started choosing peace over chaos. And for the avoidant, that peace is deafening because now they're the one left wondering. They're the one refreshing your profile, replaying your last words, analyzing the moment it all changed. They can feel the energy shift and they hate that they no longer have access to you. Not just physically, but emotionally. You've closed the door, not out of spite, but out of self-love. And that is the moment when the avoidant finally starts to grasp what they had and what they lost. The power shift doesn't come from playing games or trying to hurt them. It comes from healing, from understanding that real love shouldn't feel like begging, that closeness shouldn't be punished, that you deserve a relationship where your love is met with openness, not fear. And when you walk away from someone who couldn't see your value while you were giving everything, that's not weakness. That's strength. And that strength is what finally gets their attention. Because the version of you who walks away, that's the version they remember forever. At first, the avoidant tells themselves that there will always be someone else, that the connection they had with you wasn't that special, that relationships come and go and no one is irreplaceable. They walk away from the anxious partner believing they're making a logical choice, convincing themselves they'll find something easier, something less intense, less emotionally demanding. But what they don't understand in the moment is this. What you gave them wasn't typical. What you offered wasn't just attention. It was emotional intimacy, real soul-level intimacy, the kind that doesn't come around often, the kind that can't be faked, replicated, or casually replaced. And the truth is, they don't realize this until they try to replace you. They go on dates. They meet new people, people who are fun, chill, seemingly low maintenance, and maybe at first, that feels like a relief. No one is asking deep questions. No one is asking them to open up. There's no pressure to connect at a deeper level. But that surface level connection wears thin fast because it lacks depth. It lacks the warmth and emotional resonance you brought into their life. See, you didn't just love them. You understood them. You noticed the changes in their energy. You heard what they didn't say. You leaned in when they pulled away, not because you were weak, but because you cared enough to meet them in their discomfort. That kind of emotional labor, the patience, the compassion, the vulnerability, you can't buy that. You can't swipe right and find that in everyone. That's rare. And when it's gone, the absence is loud. They start to compare, subconsciously at first, the way you laughed at their jokes versus the polite smiles from someone new, the way you instinctively knew when they were overwhelmed, the way you held space for their fears without judgment. That kind of emotional closeness leaves a mark, even on people who aren't ready to admit it. And the avoidant, who once rejected that level of intimacy because it felt overwhelming, now finds themselves aching for it because every new connection feels flat in comparison. And the irony, they realize it after you've moved on, after your warmth has been withdrawn, after your presence is no longer within reach. That's when they start looking at old photos, rereading old texts, searching for evidence that what they had was real, because deep down, they know it was. It just scared them. They weren't ready for someone who saw their soul when they were still trying to hide it. But now that they've met others who only see the surface, they understand just how unique your love was. Because unmatched intimacy doesn't come from how long you've known someone. It comes from how deeply they make you feel seen. And you made them feel seen, maybe for the first time. And while they may have run from that mirror, the reflection stayed with them. The way you loved them stayed with them. The way you were emotionally available, present, real, it imprinted on them. So even when they're lying next to someone else, they might feel that void, that sense that something is missing, that you are missing. It's in that realization that regret deepens. Not because they can't find someone else, but because they can't find you again. Your essence, your emotional depth, your capacity to connect. And that's when it hits. They didn't just lose a relationship, they lost something sacred. And it wasn't because you weren't enough. It was because what you offered was more than they could handle at the time. So the avoidant sits with that quietly, sometimes silently. And while they might never say it out loud, they feel it. They carry it. That awareness that what they once had was rare. That the intimacy they once rejected is now the very thing they crave but can't seem to find again. Because you didn't just offer love. You offered intimacy that reached their core. And that kind of connection, once it's gone, it's unforgettable. There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, when the avoidant finally sees it. Not all at once, but in fragments, in flashes. It might happen on a random Tuesday afternoon. It might hit them while scrolling through old photos, or when a familiar song plays, or when they see someone who reminds them of you. And suddenly, it's not just a memory anymore. It's a truth that settles in. You really love them. Not conditionally, not performatively, but fully, genuinely, in a way that was rare, in a way that asked for nothing but honesty and emotional presence in return. And they let it go. This realization doesn't feel like regret. It feels like grief, because now they're not just missing a person. They're mourning a kind of love they didn't recognize until it was out of reach. A love that saw them in their messiness, in their fear, in their silence, and chose to stay. Chose to keep showing up. Chose to love them not for who they pretended to be, but for who they really were underneath all the defenses. That's the kind of love most people don't get even once in their lifetime. And that's what they walked away from. They thought they needed space. They thought they needed freedom. They told themselves that love shouldn't feel so intense, so consuming, so emotional. But now they understand. It wasn't the love that was too much. It was their fear. It was their inability to receive something so pure, so available, so real. They realized you weren't asking for too much. You were simply asking for presence, for honesty, for commitment, for emotional maturity. And they couldn't give it at the time, not because you weren't worthy, but because they hadn't done the work. That realization cuts deep, because they see now that you weren't just another person who came into their life. You were the one who loved them through their shadows, the one who believed in them when they doubted themselves, the one who offered grace where others would have walked. And they let that person go, not because you did anything wrong, but because they were still more loyal to their avoidance than to their own healing. And now, in the aftermath, they sit with the consequences. They look around at their life and something feels empty. Not because they're alone necessarily, but because the connection they once had, the one with depth, with honesty, with soul, is gone. The conversations you used to have, the way you used to ask questions no one else asked, the way you knew when something was wrong without them saying a word. It all starts to replay in their mind, and with every memory comes a wave of pain, not because the love wasn't real, but because it was. And they let it slip through their fingers. They may try to distract themselves, try to date other people, try to keep moving, but when the dust settles, they feel it. The loss, the finality. Because they're not just missing a relationship, they're missing you. The kind of person who would have walked through fire for them, the kind of person who gave them chance after chance to meet you emotionally, And the truth is, they didn't just lose a partner. They lost a version of themselves they could have become if they'd stayed someone open, someone vulnerable, someone capable of love without fear. And that loss doesn't go away. They carry it in the quiet moments, in the stillness, in the conversations they'll never get to have, in the birthdays and holidays that pass without you, in the knowing that you loved them not just for who they were, but for who you believed they could become. That kind of love leaves a permanent mark. So while you've grown, healed, and moved on, they remain haunted by the realization that they had something real, something extraordinary, and they let it go. Not because it wasn't right, but because they weren't ready. And by the time they were, you were already gone. And that's when they finally understand they didn't just lose someone who loved them. They lost someone who would have stayed through it all, if only they had chosen to show up too. So here's the truth. When the avoidant rejected the anxious partner, they thought they were choosing peace. They thought they were protecting themselves from the intensity of vulnerability, from the fear of being truly known. But what they were really doing was walking away from the rarest thing most people will ever find. Someone who loved them in their rawest, most unfiltered form, someone who stayed when it was hard, someone who fought for the connection when it would have been easier to walk away. But love doesn't beg to be noticed forever. Eventually, even the most patient, most loyal hearts choose themselves. And when the anxious partner finally stops explaining, stops reaching out, stops trying to fix what they didn't break, the avoidant is left with a silence they never expected to feel so loudly. That silence becomes the teacher. It reveals everything they couldn't see before. The depth, the intimacy, the safety, the rarity of what they had. And that's when it hits them. They didn't lose you because you stopped loving them. They lost you because they took your love for granted. And now, you're not angry. You're not chasing. You're just gone. Not out of spite, but out of strength. And that's the moment everything changes. Because now they see you not through the lens of fear, but through the clarity of loss. And that's when they finally understand they didn't let go of someone who loved them. They let go of someone who would have never stopped loving them. Let that be your reminder. Your love is not a weakness. It was a gift. And the right person won't run from it.